So what we do here is give you an introduction to the concept of the front controller and show you its implementation in Magento and how Magento uses configuration to get to the routes. So by the end of the day, we'll be doing controller stuff. And if you've ever worked with Magento, controller can be like the bane of your existence if you need to do any rewrites or figure out how they work, what to put in the XML, what not to put. We will demystify all of this for you. So, we start with the front controller. All right. You recall this diagram from the previous lesson where we initialize the application and then we get down to routing, which is the responsibility of the front controller. Well, front controller has 5 areas of responsibility. It gathers routes via its init method. Apply database URL rewrites. So these are the rewrites that are built into the database when you make a category, when you make a product. These paths are stored in the database with some additional information, and Magento will inspect the current path against the database to see if it needs to translate to an actual internal path. And we'll look at that actually extensively in the next lesson. So after that, we apply configuration URL rewrites. These are not the way you do rewrites anymore. Deprecated. But the facility is still there. Next up is matching a router. So we find out which router should be dispatching this, handling this request, and then get it into the right hands, into the right module controller file, and send some output. That's what front controller does. So front controller is the area of the application that handles all the logic and objects involved with request and response. Another diagram of this is, the actor, in this case the visitor to the site. Give me a page, index.php, kicks off mage run, kicks off app run, fires up our environment, our config, looks at our cache, initializes modules, applies updates, and then we instantiate mage core controller variant front. That's the front controller. And then we go and find the appropriate router and route the request to the correct controller. That's it. It's about as deep as we go. Here is another diagram of exactly what I just said. So front controller initialization. So this is in Mage Core Model app. Things to notice here and run are this process request. This is full page caching in Enterprise. So basically, if this method returns something at all, then we don't kick off the routing. We just simply return the content that we have cached. That's why full page caching is so fast. It's the availability of a cached instance of a page is determined very early on in the application initialization. So, if not though, we get our front controller and dispatch. So, inside our front controller, there's this init method, and what we really do is we loop through our configuration files and build out a bunch of information. Just build out this array structure and add a router that we can then use to hopefully dispatch requests. So when then inside of dispatch, we apply database URL rewrites. Okay, so this is Mage Get Model Core URL rewrite. So this is actually where we get our. At this point, we have our configuration object working Magento internally uses its factory method to get this file. Where is this file found? MageCore model URL rewrite. Exactly. That's it. And the URL rewrite model it's nice. It's a nice simple entity in the system, just one table to represent the data. One complete row represents one complete rewrite entity. So basically, we just check and see. Okay, does this route on which we currently are, for example, here I've got this nice, pretty URL, search engine friendly, electronics cellphones.html. If this were let's see. Say this category ID is 10. Then if I weren't using these nice search engine friendly URLs, I would have my web root, and then instead of electronic cellphones.html, I would have catalog, category, view, ID 10. Not very good. Not very good for search engines. So the nice thing is when you create a category, Magento will actually build this stuff out for you, and you are free to specify it yourself. We'll be looking at that in a second. So, again, what happens though, the reason that I get the content from catalog category view ID 10 when I go to that pretty URL is just because there's a match in the database, and Magento will translate that to the actual application path internally. And then this rewrite is just the function that evaluates these global rewrites that you can specify in the configuration. This is a brute force and seriously deprecated way of doing controller rewrites. You would never do this anymore. Number 4. All right. Well, we check with each of the routers and say, hey, can you handle this? And again, we're just inspecting. We're just doing string comparison, basically. And then there's this, you see this, incrementer for less than 100. Basically, if you mess up your code somewhere and you have your module redirect to a module which redirects to that module, well, obviously that would be, it's like when we were all learning BASIC and you'd like, line 1, go to 10, line 10, go to 1, and, the computer would melt. But, well, this one you'll see a nice little error message, the maximum number of dispatch calls have been hit. All right, so then number 5. This is the goal of what we're doing. We need to get the response object, whatever's been tacked onto the response object, and send it to the browser. It was just the number that was chosen. Because it just makes you would never have this many attempts at a route match. Again, the only time you're going to come up against this is if you have some error in your code.
So the underscore routers will have all kind of routers like these database routers.
Yeah, we'll actually look at this configuration in just a second. It makes a lot more sense. That's what we're dealing with in here, and even further down into the code, but it makes much more sense looking at it from the configuration standpoint. Again, Magento just always comes down to configuration, because anything that the system is doing, it has to connect somewhere in some XML file. Okay, so now an exercise. Locate the front controller class. MageCore controller variant front. List all the events that the front controller fires. Let's see. Okay, so let's find this. So this class, I'll go ahead and write it up here. It should be in your book in a couple places, but this is a great place to look. Again, if you want some more insight into the internals, MageCore controller variant front. So let's see. And you can see here the default router that's added last. This is what handles like 404 stuff. So that's why your request can always be handled by Magento, even if it's a 404. It's just because of this default router. So let's see. All right. Next method though is dispatch. So we get our request object. All right. And here, some profiler methods, but what we're looking for are some dispatched events. So I'll go to the top of this file. What's the first one here? Dispatch event. Oh, so in our initialization, controller front init before. All right. So what could we do with this? Anyone? What's that? Yeah, I mean we can observe and do anything we want with this. We could use this to we could basically write to a log and just said, hey, okay, so this is when we started off our this is when we initialized our front controller. This is at the very high up in the request. So we could set up our unlogging information just to, I don't know, profile rendering time resources. Okay. What about another one? Init routes. Well, here, we could use this observer. We could actually init routers. We can actually do something similar here. Maybe we could add another router to the system. And because it would be added ahead of this default router. That's how the CMS router works. It's added by an event. Okay. See the next one. Okay. Anyone have an idea what we could do with controller front send response before? Any idea at all what we could do with that? Yeah, we could do. Yeah, we could check our output. We could also allow set a cookie. So this one's our gimme. You guys do need coffee. All right. And then we have controller front send response after. So we could detail some of the rendering time in here, a number of events, or just log some sort of success message that we successfully handled a request. Okay. Sky's the limit. Those events are there for you to use and abuse. All right. Wow, that was quick and easy.